3, 2, 1.
Welcome back to the PolitiPop podcast, the podcast where we take your favorite pop culture media and discuss the social and political themes within. I'm your host, Mike Booch, coming off of a long hiatus to bring you our special trilogy. That's right, we have 3 podcasts coming up, including this one, on Class. And today's episode is going to revolve around our first of 3 movies involving Class, and this first one is Parasite. And with me is going to be my closest friend, one of my favorite co-hosts to have, the very knowledgeable and super woke, Tyler C. How's it going, Ty?
I'm doing really well, man. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
No problem. It's the least I could do. I'm glad that this is something you really wanted to record, so we were finally able to get the PolitiPop podcast back off of its hiatus. And I mean, now I have the time, right?
Yeah, I think a lot of people do. So, yeah, it is a good time to do it. And I think class struggle and class conversations are really big right now. So there's not a better time to talk about a film like Parasite.
Now, tell me a little bit about Parasite. It was Best Film of the Year, am I correct? Or
yeah, it won the Academy Award. It actually won 4 Academy Awards. So it won.
Get out of here.
Yeah, it won Best Picture, Best Original Screenplay, Best Director, and Best International Film. I don't think a lot of people expected to take all those awards. Definitely international film, but taking Best Picture was kind of unheard of. I don't think anyone expected that. But the film is incredible. I mean, if anyone hasn't seen it, I highly recommend it. It takes a lot of turns you don't expect. The film basically deals with a very poor family who's trying to get by, and they tend to cheat the system. They try to cheat people who have more money than them and try to get money to survive.
And that being said, spoilers for the rest of this podcast. If you have not seen Parasite and don't want it spoiled, do not listen to this podcast yet. First, watch it. It's definitely worth it. Rent it, buy it if it's available. But now is the time to be talking about it, like you said, because if you weren't able to relate to this family beforehand, you're probably going to be able to relate to them now, if not in another month or so.
It's definitely a film, the less you know going in, the better.
Oh, yeah. I did not expect all of the turns that it took. But like I told you afterwards in private, I said for a Korean film to make the mainstream, it has to be fucked up.
Yeah.
You know, when you think about it, Old Boy, that was my first introduction to Korean cinema. And that was, kind of a cult classic because it's so fucked up. And Snowpiercer, which is going to be the 3rd movie that we discuss on this podcast, is, I'm not going to say it's a Korean film, but it has a lot of American actors and it's in English, but it's directed by Bong Joon-ho, just like Parasite is. And it's a huge diverse cast.
Yeah, I mean, if anyone hasn't seen Bong Joon-ho's films, he really has some great stuff. A lot of commentary on it's kind of like George Romero, actually, like a lot of social commentary in his films. He's done Okja, The Host, Snowpiercer. I mean, he's done some different stuff, but you walk away definitely remembering his films and the messages behind them. I think he's a fantastic director. I'm glad he's being recognized for his work.
Yeah, I'd say it's about damn time. Even though I am one of the people who is very new to this, but I'm on board for it. And the reason why now is a good time to talk about that, we're going to be covering 3 different films. This first one, like I said, is Parasite. The second one is going to be a Netflix original film called The Platform. It is a Spanish film. And the third film is going to be Snowpiercer, another Bong Joon-ho joint. And each film and each podcast is probably going to get a little bit more radical. And it's funny because the podcast first came about, the PolitiPop podcast first came about after Donald Trump was elected in 2016. I was like, you know what? I got to do something. I got to say something. I got to let my voice be heard. And I think like a lot of people, politically and socially, after a certain amount of time, that voice just kind of dies down. It gets stifled and you kind of just fall into the normalcy of everything.
Yeah, I think you just need to get your feelings out there, whether anyone actually listens or not. You know, I know you started this podcast. I'd been on it, I think, just once before, but over the last year or two, I've started to become much more interested in politics, the things going on in our country. And, I wanted to talk about it. I wanted to tell people about it. You start by maybe sharing like memes and things on Facebook or Twitter. And, you try to get some stuff out there to your friends. But, a lot of the people you need to reach aren't the ones that are listening. And it's frustrating. It's really tough to feel that way. So, I know we started talking and then watching a film like Parasite, you can't help but just want to just talk about it and dissect it and get your own thoughts about it out there.
Well, yeah, and I found myself becoming a little complacent with the way things were. Obviously, I do not like the Trump administration or anything that they're doing, but at a certain point, like you said, you're not talking to anybody who needs to listen. You're talking to people who are already listening. But in case people aren't aware, the world has been struck by a new virus, a new coronavirus known as COVID-19. They're working on treatments. They're hopefully working on vaccines. I don't know. But it has quite the death toll already. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. It's all over the news, all over any sort of media. But in case you find this Generation Omega after the apocalypse, just know that this is what happened after our entire civilization dies out and we're taken by artificial intelligence.
Well, the most frustrating thing about this virus isn't, obviously it sucks. People are dying, they're sick. It's scary, but I think the way it was mishandled, especially,
and it's continued to be mishandled.
Oh yeah, it still is. Yeah, in the USA in particular, we are just really bungling this whole thing. That starts from the top with Donald Trump and his administration, but people are trying to make heroes out of Governor Cuomo and other politicians who are doing the bare minimum to make sure people don't die, and we could be doing so much more, and we should have done so much more.
Yeah, so that brings us to a state right now where there are, I want to say, 6.6 million people who have applied for unemployment because they've been furloughed or laid off or lost their jobs or just can't work. I'm one of those people who just cannot work right now. So a lot of people are now discovering just how rough things are for those who are unemployed. I think a lot of folks, especially the middle class and upper class, they would think, oh, well, people who are on unemployment or homeless people, they're mooching off the system and blah, blah, blah. But it's like, hey, you're now put in a situation where it is impossible for you to work.
It's definitely interesting. It's almost like the great equalizer in some ways. A lot of people are now in the same position, no matter, rich or poor, everyone. You're forced to stay indoors, or if you do still work, you're considered an essential worker, which is also incredibly scary. It's an interesting place for everyone to be, and as you see, there's so much fallout from this, more than just people getting sick. Like you said, jobs being lost, businesses closing, not being able to see friends and family and celebrate birthdays. And we have Easter coming up, which is basically canceled. St. Patrick's Day was basically canceled. There's so many ramifications from this. And the government's plan was a stimulus package, which will give Americans $1,200, one shot of $1,200, and if you make over,
oh my god,
yep, one shot, and if you make over 75,000, it goes down a little bit, and that's really it. They're bailing out major corporations. The cruise industry is getting bailed out, and the cruise industry will often say they're not from, let's say, the United States, so they don't have to pay the same taxes. They'll say they're from another country, but they're still getting bailed out by the government. I mean, this is I don't remember the exact number. I think it's like $2 trillion that is being spent, and Americans are walking away with $1,200 or less one time, and that's enough to maybe cover rent, if that, for a person. Depending where you are. New York State, that does not cover your rent.
My fiance and I pay $1,700 a month.
Yep,
plus
there you go.
Utilities and other bills.
Exactly. And that's the best they could come up with. And this is not just Republicans. This is Democrats too. They rejected the original stimulus package, and this is the best they could come up with. This is the best that they could come up with. Around the world, they are freezing rent, mortgage payments. electric, gas, all of those things, and paying their citizens for the wages lost. I believe the UK is paying 80% of wages lost. I know Italy froze everything from mortgages and rent down. I think Canada's paying $2,000 a month to its citizens, and the best we could do was a one-time $1,200 deal. And the government has not gotten the country on the same page. I mean, there are some states like us here in New York who are on a sort of lockdown. I think California sort of, yeah. I mean, there's still people going about their day. And then there's so many states that aren't even doing that. It's like, how can we get ahead of this?
Yeah, and then there's others that it's not called a stay-in-home order, but it's something to that effect, right? Where like they're like, all right, you have to stay home. New York is kind of gray on that area, like you said. The essential workers, they're still working, but the folks like me, it's like encouraged to stay in, but it's not 100% mandatory. And I'm not saying I want it to be. That goes into a police state. That's a whole other thing.
Absolutely.
But the big mask off moment here is that we're now seeing that the government cares more about the economy and more about profits and corporations than they do about people.
Yeah, they're willing to let people die, especially our elderly citizens who are most at risk here. They will let them die for the economy. They have basically said that in so many words. And I think because Donald Trump hasn't taken it seriously enough, there are so many people who aren't. I mean, I'm considered an essential worker. I work in a grocery store, and the amount of people that come shopping is insane. Like we have to line them up outside. We're only allowing about 25, 30 people into the building, and I've seen people come in every day, or they come in I saw a guy walk out with popcorn.
The same people.
Yeah, the same people. They come every day. I saw a guy walk out with popcorn and orange juice. I mean, they're not taking it seriously. If you're going to go grocery shopping, and listen, if you need food, you need food. Do a big shopping. Get what you need for at least the week, and stay home. These people are not getting that, and you can see that. I can see it almost every day.
Well, yeah, and it was an interview on Fox News. Republican Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, he's a 69-year-old Republican. He told Fox News host Tucker Carlson, he said, "Let's get back to work. Let's get back to living. Let's be smart about it. And those of us who are 70 plus, will take care of ourselves. Don't sacrifice the country. Don't do that." So he's saying that old people are more than willing to risk their own lives and die for the economy. Later on, he says, Tucker, no one reached out to me and said, as a senior citizen, are you willing to take a chance on your survival in exchange for keeping the America that all American loves for your children and grandchildren? And he said, if that's the exchange, I'm all in. So this guy, who I'm assuming is a pretty privileged guy, is not the only person who shares this sentiment. And I know that for a fact. And he's saying, you know what? Let's just let the economy prosper and let human lives go to waste.
I mean, there's so much to dissect there. First of all, someone like him, like you said, is probably a privileged, human being who doesn't need to put himself in danger. Even though he's saying that, I'm sure he could have somebody shop for him. He probably has a pretty nice home. You're seeing like even celebrities around the world being like, "Oh man, I'm cooped up at home. I'm just like you guys." Listen, living in your giant mansion with a farm behind your house that you can explore is not the same as being stuck in a 1-bedroom apartment, or like a tiny house and you have animals. Whatever it is, like it's not the same. And we're also seeing in this country a lot of young people are dying, which they were not expecting. I mean, I've seen people in their 20s. I think there was an 18-year-old teenager who died a few weeks ago. People in their 30s, 40s. Like, this is not just killing people in their 70s and 80s. It's killing everybody.
Yeah, and like you said, that's what makes it the great equalizer. And so now is the time to be talking about class, because it isn't just about, world health and public health. It is, but clearly, I think Selena Kyle said it best in The Dark Knight Rises, when Bruce went bankrupt. Everything has to come back to Batman with me, you know how it is. Bruce went bankrupt, and he said, "Oh, they're letting me keep the house," and she said, "Not even the rich go broke the same as the rest of us." And that's clearly it. I am worried. My paid time off is about to run out this week, and then I become one of those people who are applying for unemployment.
It's a scary time. It's a scary time for everybody.
Yeah, we ordered DoorDash last night, and you and I have done DoorDash.
Yep.
But this was like like a mother of like 2 kids. Like she didn't bring her kids with her, but you just get to read, and like, and like she was a bit of an older, middle-aged woman, and she was really nice and everything. But I'm like, you wouldn't be door dashing right now if you didn't have to.
Yeah, I mean, funny enough, I got DoorDash yesterday too, and they're offering like a no contact thing where they just leave it on the doorstep, and it's just so weird to me, As like you said, we did DoorDash, and like I'm used to like that interaction, and now it's just like they just drop it in your doorstep, and you just wait, and then you look outside, you're like, all right, it's here.
I felt weird about that one because that if you tip on the app, DoorDash will keep some of that.
Well, they're saying they're giving 100% now. They have.
Oh,
updated.
Now they are.
They're claiming now.
God.
In a time of crisis, they're giving 100% of their tip to their employees.
That's insane because they would do messed up stuff, like if you've ever DoorDash, they guarantee you $11 on this thing. Now, let's say a person tips you like $5 through the app. That means DoorDash only pays you $6.
Yep.
And that you get $11 all in all, which is just, it's ridiculous. So I made sure I gave her cash, and I asked her if she was okay with me handing her the cash, and she was cool with it. But still, it's a whole thing. So that's why we're talking about class, because all of us are suffering, and now the faults of our capitalist overlords and our government are being brought to light, and it's showing that they really don't care about the people. And the lower class, especially the lower class, but even the people who are middle class and consider themselves to be in an okay spot, they're also getting screwed right now. So let's start at the beginning of the film. Like you said, we have an impoverished family in Korea, and mind you, I did not plan on relating to this film so much as I figured there would be a little bit of dissonance between cultures, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I related to this 110%. People are people, no matter where. So we have this family of 4, right? A mother, a father, and 2 children who are around what, college age probably? Maybe
yeah, I think
20s.
They said they're around that age. Yep.
Yeah, let's say they're early 20s, and of course, like it starts off with them losing the free Wi-Fi above their apartment, and you're like, okay, why is that a big deal? Don't you have your own Wi-Fi? No. They don't have their own Wi-Fi. They don't even have their phones on, which is why they're using the Wi-Fi above their apartment. And of course, the mother turns to the father and she says, "What's your plan?" And that kind of resonated with me because, growing up. So I grew up first living with a single mother and then living with a single father in that order. We were never the people who had an awful lot of money. And just so you know, I'm going to be going back and forth to my childhood a lot with this. And if you can bring up stuff as it comes up also, I think that would be great because there's a lot of desperate stuff they do, and there's a lot of desperate stuff we had to do to survive growing up too.
Absolutely, yeah. We've been in situations like that, especially with parents who don't know how to get the money to put food on the table and keep a roof over your head, so they kind of cheat the system a little bit or do what they got to do to survive. So it's definitely relatable.
Absolutely. And it seems like they're freeloaders, right? It seems like, okay, they're using somebody else's Wi-Fi, blah, blah, blah. But you find out that the mom wants them to use their phones to get Wi-Fi so they can use WhatsApp because she's waiting to hear from a job.
Yep.
And that's something a lot of people don't think of, right? You see a homeless person on the street, you go, listen, why don't you get a job? But the very concept of getting a job costs money, right? Can a homeless person, like, New York City, homeless person walk into a job interview dressed the way they're dressed?
No, absolutely not. There's no chance of that.
Yeah, so you have to pay solid money to get presentable clothes. Okay, and then you have to be able to apply for a job. So you need either the internet, like they are trying to get, or you need transportation to apply for one. So if you don't have a car, you need to pay money to use public transportation to go to a physical place.
Yeah, I mean, Parasite does a really good job of showing a situation like that. It's a very funny film. It's darkly funny. They kind of have that.
It starts off pretty funny, and then
they have like that montage where they're trying to fold pizza boxes, and they're practicing, they're like watching like videos to try and get it right, and you're like, well, what's going on with this? And it turns out that they're selling the boxes to a pizza company. And because some of the boxes aren't perfect, they decide the doctor to pay, I think it was 10%, which doesn't seem like a lot, but when you have no income, that is huge, right? And it all leads to the son trying to get a job working for the pizza company, where he's telling, oh, listen, you got that one guy working there, you should fire him, he's not good at his job. Me, like, I'm ready, like, I'm young, I'm smart, like, I can help you out, like, I'll be great, and it's like they're so desperate for a job, and this is the situation, I guess, of the people around them, that he's even trying to get someone fired to take the job.
And he's a real sorry to cut you off, but he's a real opportunist, which is what you have to be when it comes to gig work in the gig economy,
Yep.
And this also spoke to me because, they have to use WhatsApp because their phones are shut off. You remember back in the day when I was using Google Voice because all I had was that flip phone?
Yeah,
I had
that's right.
3 or 4 different phone numbers that I would text people from. And this whole idea of being an opportunist, when I left my full-time over a year ago to become an actor, I was doing Uber, Lyft, DoorDash, and at some point I was giving an Uber ride to this guy who owned a DJ business. And in speaking with him, that's how I became a DJ. Like, I got a whole new skill and a whole new job from just being an opportunist and being able to jump on everything that comes my way.
Yeah, you kind of had to sell yourself to other people to get the job you wanted, right? Like, you had to kind of like claw for that.
Exactly, because you never know like where your next meal's coming from. You never know where your next job's coming from. And so this right here, and this reminds me of, back when I lived with you at I would come over to your place all the time when we were kids, but like, when I moved in with you at like 16 years old, this really resonated, spoke to me. I keep using these words over and over again, but when they finally do get some money from the pizza boxes, they're eating junk food and drinking beer. And you got to wonder, why is that? And it turns out it's because that's really all they can afford.
Yeah, I mean, I think, there's a simple pleasure to those kind of things. I remember as a kid, my dad kind of left, he was out of the picture. My mom was a single mom who had lost her job. It was right after 9/11, and the economy was not great. It was very difficult for her to get a job, especially she had a lot of mental problems at the time. And, I remember we would get like a tax refund, and like you'd get, I don't know, $1,000 or whatever they would give you for like having kids and stuff. And it was like, oh man, we got this money. We're gonna get food. We're gonna rent a movie. Like, she'd buy like a video game for me and my brother. It was like this big thing. And like, they say you should save your money, especially when you don't have a lot of money. But it's so hard because you've struggled for so long, whether it's months, weeks, a year, and when you finally get that money, you just want a little bit of happiness. So you go and you spend it. So seeing the family like kind of like celebrating like that. Definitely understand it. I think I still do that to this day. You get a little bit of money, you're like, I got to get something nice.
Yeah, exactly. And, there are people who say like, oh, like you said, you should save because you don't have anything. But at a certain extent, is $500 or $300, that's going to be the difference between me getting a house right now?
Yeah, I mean, like, is that a life worth living? Like, if you have to struggle your entire life just so you one day have enough savings to not have to struggle, I don't know. I don't know if that's worth living, because do you want to be tortured for 30 years to live out your last 25 or whatever it wants? I don't know. It's a hard one to answer.
Well, I'd say no. It's not worth living. And then there's, it also reminded me, like, because when I came over to hang out with you on a weekend or whatever, your mom, she was working at least one job, single mom, busting her ass to take care of 2 kids, and then 3 when I was living with you guys. And what would dinner be? It would be fucking McDonald's.
Yeah. Yep.
It would be pizza. Because try working a full day and then making a meal for like 4 people. Like,
yeah, I mean, my mom would be working. She'd be driving to pick us up from school, drop us off, like, the whole thing. You got to go shopping, this and that. Like, no one else is helping her with errands. No one was doing laundry for her, like, she had to do all this stuff on her own. Who wants to go home and cook a meal at that point? You know what I mean? Exactly. So, like, you go and you buy something quick and easy, and that's how they always get you.
And another thing that struck me here was, we're thinking, oh, why don't they buy food that they can cook? Their phones aren't even on. Do they have gas? Do they have electric? Can they cook? That stuff doesn't really occur to you until you're in it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think there's some interesting things about the family too. Obviously they are poor. They don't have a lot of resources, but they are smart. The kids are really, really intelligent.
Absolutely.
And I don't know if they specifically say it, but they almost mention like could have done really well in college, or really well in school, but they just didn't have the resources to go. And it's a shame, because you almost wonder what could these kids have grown up to become if they'd had the same opportunities as people with more money around them.
Well, and that is the idea. And I think you're right. They bring it up a couple of times. Oh, you would have been great in college. You should have you're smarter than my college friends.
Yep.
That's what Kevin's friend keeps saying to him. And that brings me to this article that I found on Forbes, which confirms that the price of college tuition has been increasing almost 8 times faster than wages have been.
Wow.
So it's like, you have this natural talent, you have an inclination toward academia, and yet it doesn't matter because you're never going to have the opportunity to go to college in the first place.
That's unbelievable. And even if you do, I mean, I don't know, how Korea is with it, but I know here in the United States, if you manage to go to college and you can get some student loans, it can cripple you for the rest of your life. So yeah, you got that education, you got to do it, you found a way, and now you're paying off this huge debt that never seems to go any lower because you can never make the payments high enough to really get rid of that interest. And you're stuck in that for almost, the rest of your life, if not another half of your life.
Did you know that student loans now make up the largest chunk of U.S. non-housing debt?
That's unbelievable. I did no idea. No.
So that means more than both credit cards or auto loans.
Wow.
A lot of baby boomers and Gen Xers even, they remember working their way through college and graduating with little to no debt. But that's virtually impossible for the current crop of students and recent graduates, you and myself included. Yeah,
you there's no way. You just don't make enough money compared to what your student loans or student debt would be. It's not the same. It, like you said, you read the numbers. It has changed. And anytime, for example, a politician brings up the idea of, hey, let's make college affordable. Let's try to get rid of some of the student debt. It's so heavily debated and fought against. It just never seems to happen. And there are people who commit suicide over this, whose lives are just ruined from the stress of, like, how am I ever going to get out of this debt?
Did I tell you about the cookie woman?
No.
Okay, so I spoke to this woman a couple months ago, really, really nice woman, and she was talking about college debt, and she was saying that she feels like the current young generation is the gimme generation, that everybody wants to give stuff to them, that they want free college. And she's like, well, why should I have to pay for college and they're not going to have to pay for college? I told her a couple of things. One thing I said was, I'm not the kind of person that if I had to suffer in some way, I want other people to suffer the same way. That's just not hardwired into me. And I know that it is for a lot of people. When I was studying martial arts, which was a huge part of my life, there would be people who would do terrible things on a belt test to other students, and to myself included. I was the third black belt to test at my dojo. They would do terrible things because that's what was done to them. But that wasn't something I ever felt like I had to pass on, because I remembered how much I hated it. I would never want to do that to somebody else. But also, I started talking to her about cookies. I said, if there's a guy who has 10 cookies and he gives you 1 cookie and somebody else wants half of that cookie, why are you mad at the person who wants half of your 1 instead of the guy who now has 9 cookies left?
That's the problem with, I think, with most countries, definitely our country. People, they just don't understand. It's that argument that, immigrants are stealing from us, or taking our resources, or taking our jobs. But the billionaires, the 1%, are hogging the majority of this stuff, and no one seems to connect it to.
Well, yeah, and you'll hear about when the ICE raids were happening and they were going into factories and arresting all of these undocumented immigrants for working there illegally. What about the guy that hired them?
Yeah.
It's not illegal to hire undocumented workers, but it's illegal to be an undocumented.
Apparently,
it just doesn't make any sense. Why are you mad at that guy when you're not mad at the person hiring them? I'm sorry.
They're not paying their taxes, right? That's a big one. They're not tax-paying Americans. We hear. Jeff Bezos does not pay taxes for Amazon. He is a billionaire, and he does not have to pay taxes. But let's go after, this guy who's trying to support his family, who ran from maybe a situation where his life and his kids' lives were in danger. But let's blame them. Let's point to them. And really, how many resources are they taking away from you?
You blame the most vulnerable people.
Exactly.
I will say, in all my time, and I've interacted with a lot of immigrants and a lot of undocumented immigrants in my time. I lived with a house full of day laborers when I was 15 years old. I worked for a Chinese restaurant for 3 years straight. And, the way that my boss came in, he came from China to Mexico, came in through Mexico, and then married his wife, who is also a Chinese immigrant, but she had been a citizen by then, married her, and that's how he got his citizenship. and and it, they all loved this country. They all loved the opportunity, blah, 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 patriotism and stuff. But the only immigrant who I've seen who has means and still chooses to mooch off the system is my father. He came here from the Dominican Republic at 11 years old, and all throughout my childhood, even when he did have good jobs, would still find ways to game the system. Even when we weren't living together, I had moved out. Under 18 years old, I had moved out. He would still be like, all right, I need you to come with me to the Department of Social Services so I can say you live with me and get more food stamps. Even up to the time of my mother's death, he would still take her money while she was in the hospital, take her food stamps, use all of that. And I'm not talking about like using it for food and stuff, because I've seen his bank statements. He would use it, buying new TVs, buying hundreds of dollars of upgrades for Marvel Contest of Champions from the Apple Store.
He would get cigarettes, drugs, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah, cigarettes, drugs, and stuff like that. But that's it, right? It's Schrodinger's immigrant, the one who doesn't work at all yet still steals jobs.
There's always gonna. Not everyone's perfect, right? Like, there's not the argument that every immigrant that comes here is going to be a great person. I mean, that's just silly. I mean,
every person that lives here isn't a great person,
exactly.
Right?
But do they make up the majority? I don't believe so. I really don't. I think most are decent people who are just trying to find a new place to live, a better place to live. Like you said, a lot of them are they love this country, they love the opportunities. Like my girlfriend's parents or her whole family pretty much are immigrants, and they really love it here. They talk about what they experienced growing up, and the crime and the poverty, and it's scary. I understand why they would want to go somewhere where they would feel safer, even if they have to work 3 jobs just to get by.
Well, yeah, because even then, if you still have half a room in a house in, Huntington Station, that's still, a roof over your head, and you don't have to worry about, the gangs coming to collect, protection money or whatever. So, yeah, I don't know exactly how we got there, but I'm glad that we did. We're back to the movie. The first person we see really show this initiative is the son, Kevin, right?
Yep.
He ends up talking to his friend who gets him a tutoring job with this really, really rich family. He gives this job to Kevin because he says, you know what, your English is great. You're smart. You're not going to hit on this girl like I know all of my college bros will. Do the right thing and make some money for your family. So they end up forging his degree to get a job. Because, like we said, if you don't have enough money to go to college, you're not going to be able to go, and then you can't get a good job. And it's like, he's never given a chance in the first place.
Yeah, he has the skills to do the same job, if not better, but will never get that opportunity just because he doesn't have that piece of paper saying he went to college.
And now when we see him get introduced to this family, it's amazing the turn he takes. Just putting on a different set of clothes and washing his face, he looks like a completely different person. He's really a social chameleon that way.
Yeah, he really sells himself in a new way, and is able to take on this job and be pretty good at it.
Because you got to be a chameleon, you know what I mean? And when you're going from job to job, or for me, job to job, house to house, whatever, you have to be able to fit in. But then he manages to bring in his own sister as an art tutor for his student's younger brother.
Well, it's all about opportunity, right? Like, he sees an opportunity pop up and he says, hey, I can get my sister in here, and now we'll have 2 incomes for this family. Like, he realizes that this rich family that he's working for, that he can kind of take a little advantage of them. They're not picking up on the schemes. They're easily fooled. And he's like, let's do what we can here. Let me get my sister through the door.
We see how poverty has transformed these people, right? How having to survive has transformed them. Kevin is more of the chameleon. He'll fit in where he needs to. His sister, Jessica, she is very fierce. She has this amazing amount of confidence that people will just bow to.
Yeah, I mean, she basically makes things up to make her job work. She's really good at fooling things. She's the one that I think that forged his college diploma in the first place. And what she does is she researches art and psychology, and she makes up this whole bullshit argument for why this young kid is making his art, and there's all this suffering in there, and
working through trauma,
exactly, and just like completely fools the mother, brings her to tears, and and afterwards she's like, yeah, I don't know, I made it up.
Oh, and it was so perfect. And this is over a conversation that they're having when this is during dinner, when they just had a conversation about all the different jobs that their father has had. And once again, that's my life, right? My father has worked so many, and your mother has worked so many different jobs too, right?
Yeah, she's worked in quite a few different kinds of places.
Yeah, and it's weird because like no two are the same. Like my father's been a taxi driver, but then he was also actually I guess they are the same. He was a bus driver. He was a driver for Coca-Cola.
There's a lot of driving.
You know, he's worked in an office, worked in the service industry as a caterer, a waiter, like everything. And they were because that's just the deal. Sometimes it's tough to work at the same place for 30-something years. And even when you do, I mean, how long have you been working? You've been working in groceries since you were, I want to say, 17 years old. Am I wrong?
That's correct. 17. I'm 30 now, so a long time, man.
So that's 13 years. How are your savings, if I can ask that?
Not great.
Right?
They're not great.
Like how insane is that? You're still living paycheck to paycheck. I mean, no matter how much you do work.
Well, I worked through college, and it's like that idea of like, all right, I got an income still, while I'm going to school, but the debt just always seems to outweigh how much you make. And again, it's that idea of, when I do have a little bit of money, you want to bring a little happiness to your life. So you're like, no, let's book a vacation. Let's go get that new game. Let's go to dinner. Let's go to the city. Whatever it is, it's hard. It's really hard to save up.
Like I said, if you save $300 or whatever, is that going to be the big difference between you getting a house next month or next year? Let's see. According to CNBC, they're talking about how much prices have risen since 1940. In 1940, the median home value in the U.S. was just $2,938. In 1980, it was $47,200. In 2000, it had risen to $119,600. So even adjusted for inflation, the median home price in 1940 would have only been $30,600.
Wow.
And that's in $2,000. And this is collected from the U.S. Census.
Well, it's interesting. My girlfriend was listening to a podcast for a while. I forgot the gentleman's name, but he's known for helping like coach people through savings and getting out of debt. That's his whole thing. He has books. He has like his own company. He's I think pretty wealthy now. And basically the gist of it is, in order to get out of debt and to save money, you have to live miserably. You can never eat out. You have to cook every night. You can't go out. You can't meet people. You can't do anything that's not free for years just to save up and get out of debt. And it works. Apparently it works for a lot of people. But you have to be miserable for so long just to get there.
To get to $0.
Exactly. Not to be like, hey, you're gonna be a millionaire. You're just gonna be out of debt. You're gonna start back at square one.
That brings me to the next grift in this movie, which is when they get their father to take the place of the driver.
Which is horrible, because they basically get this guy fired. They get this driver fired. They come up with a plan to where the daughter is being driven home by him, and she leaves her panties in the back seat on the floor, so that when he's driving the patriarch of the family the next day or whatever day, he finds it in the back seat. And he's so disgusted by it, by the fact that this driver would do this in his seat, in his car, that he fires him.
And what's so interesting about that is that he does say, he's like, well, what's really the issue is if they leave behind panties, maybe the girl wasn't in the right frame of mind. Maybe she was, drunk or on drugs or something like that. And he kind of makes it a moral thing. But before that, first and foremost, he says, does he feel like he's spiting me by dripping his semen into my car seat? Like, that's the thing for him, is the ego. How dare my employee strike at my ego by using my car to have sex with somebody?
Yeah, I mean, they constantly show you, besides the fact that there's a money difference, that these people just have a different mindset, and they know they're not equals. Like this rich man believes in his heart that he is better than these people that work for him, that he is somehow superior.
And so long as he pays those people, he has a right to treat them however he treats them. That being said, throughout most of the movie, he doesn't seem like a really bad guy.
Well, yeah, I think this whole family, they're really not bad people.
They're not bad people.
I think they're disconnected from reality.
Absolutely.
They don't they don't even see these grifts coming because they don't it's not even in their mindset to ever do something like this, to ever be in a desperate situation, because they always have what they need and what they want, and he has like certain rules for it that people can never cross, whether it's smelling bad or just eating too much, or like things that he judges. He's always judging them. But at the same time, he's not a bad guy. He wants to give them a decent wage, and he'll pay them a little extra for certain things.
And he seems nice enough, and he makes some conversation with them too.
Absolutely, right? I think in their minds, they're good people. They think they're really good people. They're not doing anything wrong.
I mentioned I became a DJ over this past summer, but there was a lot of stuff involved in that. Not just DJing parties, but also working 16-hour days, hauling inflatable bouncy houses and dunk tanks all over the place. And, the guy who owns the DJ business, getting involved in a lot of his personal affairs. And it was, I developed mild anxiety from working as hard as I had to over the summer. As many jobs as I could find, not just that one. And when I finally came out to him and told him, hey, I went through all of this stuff for you. You can't just treat me however you want to. He goes, well, I paid you for that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. You find yourself doing things that you didn't even think were in your job requirements. I think that you see that a lot in the movie too. He's his driver, but he's not just his driver. He has to carry presents into the house. He has to help, with packages and this and that.
Goes grocery shopping with the wife.
Exactly.
Everything for her.
They get invited to like family gatherings. They have to do things that they don't expect to be in that job requirement. And there's really, they're not treated any better for it.
Absolutely. And an interesting thing he said here, when the father of the family finally gets the job with the patriarch of the rich family, and he's driving him, and he's spouting up some bullshit. Oh, I've worked as a driver for this many years, blah blah blah. Something my father has also done. This guy's very much like my father, except I don't hate the main character's father of this film. So the rich guy, he says, I respect those who work in one field for a long time.
Yeah, he does say that to him. Yep.
And that was so interesting to me. How do you feel about that? Not that he said it necessarily, but just with that sentiment, because a lot of people hold it.
It's interesting because, like you said, I've been in the same field for a long time. I've been in the grocery business for 13 years. But I do interview. I'm a manager at my job. And that is an interesting thing to look at when you see an application, right? And you see somebody who jumped from job to job. It's one of the first questions you ask about. You're like, why'd you leave here? Why did you jump around so much? Why didn't you stick with it? And then, but at the same time, right, you see somebody especially if they try to get outside of that job, he's going for another driving job in this movie. But if you try to go outside of your boundaries, your safe zone, and you try to do something different, it's like, so why do you want to switch careers? You've been a bank teller for 35 years, and now you want to work in a grocery store? So I don't know how I feel about it. I think everyone has different opinions on it. And I'm not sure where I stand.
I think if it works for you, go for it. But I never realized that this was a thing until I met my fiance, because she comes from a family in which her father, he finally retired, but he's been working as a union carpenter for over 30 years. Her mother has also been working in grocery, actually. She's, a manager at her store, and she's been working there for over 30 years. My fiance has been working in the same field for over 9 years, same job, worked her way right from the bottom to the top. And yet she was one of the people who just got furloughed.
Yeah. Yep.
By her job. And it was interesting because when I change jobs a lot. That's just what I do.
Well, I think people sometimes look down on people who switch jobs because they feel like they don't have their life together. Whereas if you've been in the same job for a long time, like, oh, you've got a career. What you would never want to give this up. You've got everything figured out.
Regardless of what the career even is, right?
Exactly. But we're seeing now, right, the people who are willing to change and adapt and change jobs are doing better because they can, hey, I lost this job. I'll jump into working at Taco Bell. I'll go do, DoorDash. I will go work at a grocery store. They'll jump around. They're like, whatever, I'll make it work. Where if you've been in your career your whole time, it's devastating. Can you imagine having a job for 30 years and then you lose it? What do you do?
What do you do? Well, so that whole thing is interesting to me because at one point she did tell me I just gotten a new job, and she said, it kind of scares me that you're always switching jobs as much as you do.
This is your fiance,
like,
right?
Yeah. And I said, why? And she's like, I don't really know. And I said, in 3 years' time, I increased my salary by $13,000.
That's huge.
And was making more than she made at her job after, working there for, must have been 8 years at the time, or 7 years. So who's really, no, I don't want to say in the right. I don't think more money equals in the right, but which way makes more sense, right? To stay at one place where they'll give you a cent raise every year, or, to move at one place saying, all right, I was making this much there, I want 5,000 more here. That being said, I ended up miserable at every single salaried position I was working at, but still, you get the idea that it just might not be for some people.
Well, I think people need to.
The type of person.
Sorry to cut you off. I think people need to look more at the companies, not the people. Why are you not?
That's great.
Why are you not being rewarded for your years of loyalty and service? My first grocery job, I started at 7:25. I was there almost about 8 years. I walked away at 10:25. And it's like 8 years of loyalty and service working.
That's not even $1 a year.
Yeah, no, it wasn't. It was not $1 a year. It was like 25 cents, and then it was like 10 cents twice a year. It was ridiculous. And that was a unionized job, and that was what the union got us. That was the wage they got us. And it just shows like, why are these companies not taking care of people? And the job I work for right now, I really do enjoy it. And I've had so many people, I was hired from without as a manager. And there's a lot of people who were promoted within. They always say, if you get hired off the street, you make more money. You get more money if you're hired off the street, which is fortunate for me. But why is that? Why is it not equal? Why is the guy who worked his way up not getting paid nearly the same amount of money? It really makes you wonder, like, why are we judging the people and not the companies that hire them?
And I want to bring that same idea back up. I mean, we'll bring it up in definitely in the platform.
Yes.
We'll bring that up, but I want to bring it up later in this podcast when we find out about the basement.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
There's some great stuff there.
So that brings us to our next part of the movie, right? We have 3 people from this impoverished family working for this rich family, but they're not going to stop there. They're going to get the housekeeper who has been there the longest. They're going to get her fired, and when they do, the mom of the impoverished family, she comes in. And now we see this entire family, they're earning 4 incomes from this richer family, feeding off of them like a parasite. I just made that connection.
Yep.
But they're all looking nice and cleaned up, and they're all dressed very well. And we see that I don't think they're necessarily chameleons. I don't think they're trying to fit in. I just think they're trying to survive.
Yeah, and I mean, they're getting this housekeeper fired in the most disgusting way. I mean, they're using her actual physical food allergies against her to make her sick, convince the wife of the rich family that she is ill and not safe to be around. And they cost her job. I think I don't know if they said this in the movie. I thought they did that. She actually had been the housekeeper there before that family was there, like for the family beforehand. Like she had been there so long doing this job, and she was so good at it. I think the rich father says like, "Oh, she's perfect. She'll clean, she'll do this. My wife can't do any of that. She's useless basically without her. She eats a little bit too much though. He laughs it off like, how she just eats so much food. But other than that, like she's perfect." And they cost her job, her livelihood for, who knows, 20, 30 years it could have been. They've cost 2 people their job just to steal those jobs because they're so desperate to get that money.
And it's like the crabs in a bucket analogy, right?
Yes, exactly.
It's that the crabs, they're not all going to make it out of the bucket, but they'll be damned if somebody is able to climb over them to get over. So they want to pull each other down so that way they can be the one to survive. They can be the one to make it, right?
Yep.
So that was great because in my notes I actually wrote, is it unethical to escalate this scam? And you answered that without me even asking it. So that's perfect. Another little thing I noticed, the father, he keeps looking back at the guy while he's driving.
Yeah.
Which is another thing that mine does all the time. And that he would do while he was driving cabs, while he was driving with me in the car, constantly looking back and then like having to swerve when he looks back at the road. I think it's a means to kind of make a connection there, because if they see you as more of a person and less of an employee, they're probably less inclined to treat you harshly.
Yeah, I do agree.
Just a theory.
It makes sense. That definitely makes sense. I like the part where the rich man, he's like eyes on the road. They have like this great conversation. They're really connecting, and then he's like just dismissive all of a sudden out of nowhere. Like don't forget your place. Like eyes on the road.
Exactly. So now we see them all having a dinner in their own place. Did you notice what they were eating?
No, I don't actually. I don't remember.
Okay, so when they have another dinner scene in their apartment again, their basement apartment, they're eating food in actual dishes, food that they cook themselves.
Right.
They're eating I don't want to say ramen, but they're eating like noodle dishes and everything. And what a big difference, right? Now that they have the income to buy something that's not junk food, now that they have the income to buy something that's a little more expensive and more nutritious for them, they did it. The opportunity was there and they took it to treat themselves better.
Yeah, I think they start talking about, hey, we can get out of this crappy, house or apartment or whatever it is, get someplace better. With all four of our incomes, we're going to make our lives great. Like they're all happy and like, we're doing this, we're going to get out of our situation.
Yeah, and they talk about how great it is that they were able to make this work because the father says, opening for a security guard attracts 500 university graduates.
Yep.
Which is completely true. Now it's like, to get what would be considered a menial job, you have to be up to such a level that just because of your station in life, wherever you were born, you may not be able to ascend to. So what hope do you have getting a menial job if you're not even able to get those requirements? Like, you're not given a chance.
I mean, I feel like they think this is their only opportunity to get ahead, by faking their way into this rich family and like you said, being a parasite, like leeching off of them to get money.
Yeah, and this was another thing that I can relate to in real life because my full-time now is, without giving too much information, I work as a one-to-one support staff for a young man with autism. And the way in which I got that job was his former support staff was going on vacation for a couple of weeks. They needed someone to cover. Friend of a friend recommended me to them, and I ended up working with him for those 2 weeks, and things actually went really, really well. Now, this other guy who was working with him had never been to college, lived in a house he was like 32 years old, living with his mom and all of his siblings still. From what I understand, they also get benefits from the government, and they get, like, I heard, all of their food from like Dollar Tree and stuff.
Wow.
So either they're not doing well or choose not to do well. I don't know, because the job he had was pretty well paying.
Well, some people like to live out, like, they don't need to live within their within their means. I guess they do want to live like Bernie Sanders, for example, right? He's got a couple $1 million, and I know he has a couple different houses, but I've heard, like, in his, like, let's say he's recording a video at his house, his
fireside chat.
Yeah, he's got like a chair full of clothes, which is something that I do. He's got like like that messiness is like, you don't have to live just because you have the money. You don't have to live extravagantly, and I think some people want to live that way. I don't know. Maybe it makes them more comfortable just to know they have that savings. They don't want to spend it.
I still have a lot of behaviors that still come from the way that I grew up. I'm a vegan. I don't eat any meat, but if I see that my fiance has bought steak or something else in the house and then ends up not eating it because she just forgot about it, I get really upset.
I get that.
Do not.
Yeah, don't waste it.
Like to waste anything because the way that I grew up. But back to this this guy who had my job before me. I ended up doing a better job than he did. So they put me on for a couple of weeks with this young man instead of him working with the other guy. And then eventually I ended up taking the position full time. Now, granted, I didn't scam my way into that position. I just did a better job than he did. And he pretty much gave it up eventually. But a position like that in which the pay is solid, you didn't need any sort of degree to get, which blew my mind. I went to school and studied special education, but pretty much anybody can walk off the street and get this job too.
But it almost feels like there's not enough jobs to go around, right? Like that's the problem. Like you said, you took this guy's job. I don't know. I think that's where you see in this movie too. They're taking other people's jobs rather than be able to get their own because they're just not available. It comes a point where, like, there's not enough jobs to go to everybody, whether they can do it or not. So you have people who are going to struggle because there is no other choice. They can't get a job.
Now, we end up in this moment where they get the chance to house sit for these rich folks. They go away, go camping for the youngest son's birthday, and they leave the housekeeper there. Of course, she invites her whole family, who are all working there, and they really make the most of it. They're just seeing the way in which they live in this house is it's beautiful and it's so heartbreaking at the same time, right?
Yeah, there's that moment where the son's he's laying on the grass, and the mom's like, "Why are you laying out there?" And he's laying on the grass looking up at the sky. And when you look at where he lives like almost in like an alleyway. It's filled with people in the same financial situation. There's tons
tall buildings.
Yeah, apartments all over. People are crammed together. Like, he doesn't get this opportunity to just lay in the grass and look at the sky. Like, it's just not there for him.
It really is. And when you think about this idea of upward mobility and people dreaming and everything, it's like, well, how do you shoot for the sky if you can't even see it?
Oof, that's rough.
Now, I've been in this situation too, in which I've gotten to house sit for people who I'm not sure they're as rich as this family, but they do all right. I was taking care of their dogs, and I got to stay in their house for a week while they were gone, and it was just amazing getting to do that. I had a couple of friends over, and I was actually able to have like a barbecue, like people do.
I remember how excited you were. You were like, "Oh, I'm in this house the whole time. We can watch movies. We're gonna hang out. Like, I have this space." It was like this huge thing.
Yeah, and it was great. I remember having you over, and just kind of getting to put on that costume for a moment. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's exactly what this family does. They drink all the expensive booze, they eat all the expensive food, and they're having a great time. While they're in this house, in this living room, the mother starts making fun of the father, saying like, "Oh, like you're saying this is your house, but if they were to walk in right now, you would scatter like a little cockroach. That's what you are, blah, blah, blah." And he gets really upset. He throws a bunch of stuff off the table and grabs the wife by her shirt. And they make it seem like it's kind of a joke, but I don't think it is.
Yeah, I don't think it is either. I think he probably has always been looked down on his whole life. There's a couple moments with that, like where he keeps feeling like people are looking down on him and judging him, and you can see the frustration, the anger like inside, internally, that he's not expressing, and you feel for him in that regard. It's a tough spot to be in.
Well, I do also, because I think he has a lot of internalized angst and self-hate.
Definitely.
And I think it's because of society, right? At the beginning of the movie, his wife turns to him and says, "What's your plan?" Because it always has to be his plan. Why can't it be her plan?
Yeah, he's a patriarch. He's gotta be the one to save the family.
Yeah, he's got to be the provider. And yet we see that his plans aren't super awesome. At the beginning, when they're fumigating the neighborhood, he says, "Leave the doors open. Leave the windows open. The fumigation will kill the cockroaches we have in the house."
Yeah, free fumigation until it overtakes the whole house, and they're like, "Oh, this is horrible, the smell. We should have shut the windows."
Yeah, they're poisoning themselves to get free fumigation. Like, that's how desperate they are. That's how desperate he is. And it's something that I witnessed growing up, too. My father drowned himself in a lot of different, alcohol, substance abuse. And part of that, I think, is his own mental health issues, but also because how do you have a kid and then you're not even able to get them one present for Christmas?
Yeah.
How much does that weigh on you? And honestly, as a child, it wasn't ever something I held against him, but I think it's something he really held against himself. And he would get very upset, and there were these outlashes of anger because he thought I looked down on him the way that everyone else did.
But it's kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy in a way, right? Because like he would act out at you, would put you in these situations, and I feel like you remember that. And now reflecting back on it, you're like, he could have handled that so much better. I get it was tough, but the way...
Oh, absolutely.
And it's like, now you do look down on him because, he didn't handle it with grace.
No, not at all. And so it was really something else to see that, and to see that, their father, for as much as he loves his family, he reacted the way he did because, society can get to be a bit too much. Not to Joaquin Phoenix Joker... this bad boy. But no matter how much we want to say that we are free thinkers, we do hold a lot of the values of the culture in which we were raised. And, that means the man's got to be the provider.
Yeah, that's the stigma, right?
And this is another point I made a note where I just said, like, they still had to screw over other working class people to get to where they did.
Yeah, they have to live with that. Don't they? I think they mentioned at one point about the limo driver or the car driver. They're like, he must have gotten a better job, right? Like, he must have gotten another job. And I think like they have to convince themselves what they did wasn't wrong. It's like, nah, he was well off. Like, he has this skill, he has this resume, he'll be fine. We needed it more.
I don't know if you were raised with that same mentality, but I know for a fact I was.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's what my mom would always tell. You got to do what you got to do for you. Stop worrying about other people. She would always tell me. Like, I remember, like, when I had my high school job, or like even in college, I would like buy Christmas presents for people, and sometimes they wouldn't give them back, and like it was like, oh, whatever. My mom would like, stop buying people stuff. Like, stop giving them presents. Like, worry about yourself for once, Ty. Worry about yourself. Do the right thing for you. And that was like a mentality that I was always raised on.
Well, and from what I've seen, it seems to be one that you've actively fought against in your own life.
Well, thank you. Yes, definitely. I think as you get older, you see the world a little differently. I mean, I'm not the same person I was 5 years ago as opposed to 10 years ago. I mean, you keep going further and further back. Obviously my political, my social standings have all changed. It's opened my eyes a lot more to the world around me, and that's why I think I was able to appreciate this film in a way I probably wouldn't have been able to years ago.
Yeah, and that's the whole point of growth and evolution. And I live with a similar mentality too, that the moments in which I have dispensable income are few and far between, but at any of those moments, I won't hesitate to spend that money on somebody else if I can.
Absolutely. You're like, hey, I'll take you to dinner, or like, I'll get you this thing, or like, we'll meet up, we'll go to a movie, and it doesn't seem big, but it is. It is when you only have a little bit of money and you're willing to spend it on someone that you care about, and not just do the selfish thing and be like, forget that.
It is, and I mean, I think that's something I get from my mom too, because my father, when he had money, he would spend it on himself. Even like if we got money donated to us from the local Girl Scout troop for Christmas because we were that family, he would be like, oh, let's get a DVD player, even though like I wanted something. I would have been happy with a bunch of action figures, you know what I mean? But he was like, no, let's get a DVD player and let's get all these rated R movies that we both totally want to watch, not just me, right?
See, that's where I think where our parents differ. Like my mom, my dad was, my dad didn't really care what he got us. So, but my mom, she was very big on, like, I'm going to get stuff for my kids. So anytime she had money, whether it was the right thing or not, she would, buy us video games, movies, toys. But it would always be to the point where, like, she couldn't afford it. She was not living within her means. So she'd get us all these video games. And the electric bill would come. And it'd be like, oh, I can't afford it. Hey, Ty, do you think you could sell a couple games so we could pay this electric bill? I'm really sorry. I'll rebuy them for you. I'll always get it for you. I'll get it back for you. And, and she meant well. She wasn't trying to hurt me. But, it was like that. Here you go, and then you take it back away. It's almost like I'd rather have not had it in the first place. It's almost
worse than not having it.
Yeah, exactly. And, like, that's something that has continued through most of my life, and, like, you get so used to it. Like, I had surgery a couple years ago, and I was gifted a Switch. A Nintendo Switch, and like I played it for the 2 weeks I was home recovering, and then when I was going back to work, she was like, hey, I can't like pay my rent, you think I could sell that Switch? I'll buy another one day, and it's like she always meant well, but she would always spend her money not responsibly at all, even more than just treating herself when you have it. She wouldn't even have the money and she'd spend it.
That goes into our whole thing of debt, right?
Yeah.
And credit cards and all this other stuff. We had very similar upbringings, except instead of it being, oh, well, I have to sell back your PlayStation 2 to pay the bills, my father would sell back my PlayStation 2 to get crack. But but like you said, would I have rather had it in the first place, or would I have rather not had it in the first place, or have it and then have it taken away? It's such a rough spot to be put in.
But all those things shape you. They shape you, and I think you can see that with the kids in this movie. They've been shaped by their parents, and like this whole scheme, it's really kind of the kids though that develop it. I think that you even see them coaching the father through certain lines that he's going to deliver. Like he's not smart enough to pull it off on his own, so the kids are like, hey, let's rehearse it. I'll play this part. You're going to say this. And they're really the ones that develop this whole scheme. But, it's the father's plan almost, right? Like they keep putting it on him, but it's really the whole family.
Yeah, and he says later on, which we'll get to, but he says later on, the reason why I never have a plan is because when the plan goes to shit, I'm paraphrasing, when the plan goes to shit, everybody loses their minds. And he goes, but, I have no reason to get upset because I had no plan in the first place.
Yeah, it's great. It's a great line.
Yeah. So we'll get to that in a bit. But so while they're in this house, who comes to the door and what do they end up finding?
So the housekeeper shows up, the one that they got fired. and she knows the house so well. She knows, they have this, a camera on the door, and she's talking. She's like, "Oh, you're the new housekeeper, right? Like, I know you're here. I left something behind. I left something, in the basement, and I need to go get it." And for whatever reason, the mother, the housekeeper, the new housekeeper, she decides to let her in. She's like, I don't know. They let her in. This old housekeeper, she doesn't hold anything against her, right? She's like, "Oh, thank you so much," but she seems like unhinged. Like, she's definitely like, there's something off there. And
she's had a rough go of it.
Yeah,
you don't know what it is.
She's definitely struggling, and she rushes into the kitchen and she goes down into the basement, and the family's like, what is she going? What is she doing here? What is she here for?
And so, what does she find down there?
They decide to follow her down. And figure out what's going on. And they see her trying to move, I guess, like a shelf, and it opens up almost like a hidden door. So they follow her down to the basement. It turns out there's a man living underneath the house in this secret trap door. And I guess they had built this for like nuclear fallout, or like in case like the government took over, like North Korea. And I guess the family that lives here doesn't even know it exists. They've kept it hidden. But this housekeeper has been here so long that she knows exactly where it is. And her husband has been living in the basement, basically surviving off of scraps from the rich family for who knows how many years.
And that was such an insane twist. That's where I was like, oh.
Yeah, I did not see that coming at all. At all. Like I had so many like theories, and I heard like little things here and there. I was like, oh man, it's like kind of like a horror movie. What are they going to find that the family's hiding? The rich family isn't hiding anything in this regard. It's the housekeeper hiding her husband. And it turns out like all that, I'm assuming, like, remember when he said all that extra food she would eat? She was like sneaking it to the husband, yes. Right? She's giving him just enough to survive. I mean, he's basically living in this underground area where he has nothing but like a pen and paper. He has some lights, a toilet, and she sneaks him food. And that's his life, right? Because he's hiding from, I think they said, loan sharks. And that's been his entire existence now. It's just surviving.
And so I want to bring back that point real quick now about living above your means, because you've brought it up a couple times, and I've heard similar sentiments shared from my fiance's family. During Thanksgiving, they thanked God that they were able to live within their means and have my fiance's father retire.
Yeah.
We lived within our means and blah, blah, blah. The patriarch of the rich family, he alluded that she was eating too much food, which it turns out she was actually giving to her husband, who lived underground in this bunker. And it blows my mind how people can still have that mentality that they want to judge, right? They want to judge, oh, if you're not rich, you shouldn't be doing this. You shouldn't be doing this. And it comes up with like the food stamp thing, or SNAP benefits, if you want to call it, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. You'll see on Facebook people say, oh, I saw somebody with food stamps getting a steak in front of me. Like, are you kidding me? I couldn't even get a steak. Why should you get a steak? And that is such an ass-backwards way of thinking. Because you're like middle class and you're like, oh, I can't afford steak. You shouldn't afford steak. Meanwhile, let's take it back to the cookies. You're not pissed that the 10 cookie guy is the one who's controlling who gets steak. Why don't we all get steak?
Well, I think it always comes down to like the 1%, the people in charge are pitting us against each other. They're always doing that. And it always comes down to us blaming, the same people who are struggling rather than the people who are hoarding all that wealth and all those resources for themselves, far more than they need. Like I don't know what you do with a couple $1 billion. How, I can think of some like extravagant lifestyle choices I can make, and I still don't know what the hell I would do with all that money. And
to burn it all out.
Yeah, and like the idea that like, I feel like people like in our situation are always like, hey, if I had that money, like I'd help like this shelter, I'd help, homeless people here, I'd like donate to this, I donate to that. And like you think of all the great you could do with it, but it seems like that never really gets done with the people who have the money. And it winds up us fighting against each other. Like, why did you get the steak when I couldn't? Why did you get this when I couldn't have it? Instead of like joining forces and being like, hey, we both deserve this. Maybe we should take some of the excess that this person has up top.
And that's exactly what happens in this movie. We see that the two lower class families here end up fighting each other, and the wealthy people's world is their battlefield. And it's so beautiful. I didn't mention at any point how beautiful this movie is. The way it's shot. The cinematography is so great.
It's
right?
It's a gorgeous film. It really is. excellent team behind this.
And we see these two families now fighting each other because the former housekeeper wants to blackmail the new family and send it to the rich family while they're gone, and they don't want that. So they're all fighting each other in this beautiful home, you know, they end up in the living room just clawing at each other, and it is so tragic.
Well, I think it's important to note though that the old housekeeper, she begs the new housekeeper first. She's like, "Listen, I will send you money if you just let him live here. Don't say anything. You can keep my job. I'm willing to send you money every month and like just let him live." Like she's willing to do that. You know, she doesn't want it until she realizes when the rest of the family fall down the stairs and she recognizes all of them, and I think they call dad or mom, and she puts it all together. They were all in this together, and that they took her job from her. That's when the turn comes, and she's like, you know, you stole this from me. You know, I was willing to work with you for like just the survival of my husband with the little money I have, and you stabbed me right in the back and stole my job. And that's when they start fighting amongst each other.
And I love how they bring that gray into a world of otherwise black and white.
Absolutely,
right?
Yeah.
How, you know, you're made to empathize with this family, but if you saw the movie from the original housekeeper's perspective, you probably would hate the main characters of this film.
Yeah, you probably would. Absolutely.
Because you don't know their story. All you know is that they're a bunch of con artists, right? And another thing I thought was interesting was the husband who's living in the bunker. Why was he living there in the first place?
Loan sharks, right?
Yep, loan sharks. It was because of debt that he was forced into living where he had to live. You know, I thought that this movie was going to be a lot more subtle with the way it covers class. Just like next week's movie, The Platform, and the one after that, Snowpiercer. I thought it was going to be a little more subtle, but no. They slap you straight upside the head with it, and honestly, I'm okay with that because it's a really good.
Well,
film.
I think the time for subtlety is over. You know,
you're so fucking right.
Like, there's been so many years that we've tried to be subtle. We've tried to talk it through. We've had so many chances to get it right, and now we are at what could arguably be the end of the world. You know, we've been on the precipice of nuclear war, a disease raging across the planet and killing people. You know, like, it's now or never. Climate change, you know, they're saying, next couple of years, if we don't do something, it's over. Like, the planet around us that we live on for all of our resources is dying underneath us, and we're not doing enough to stop it. So I think the time for subtlety is over. It's like, get your fucking act together, you know, like, you have to do this.
And now I want to go into the next part of the movie where the rich family ends up having to come home last minute, and you know, it becomes this race for time as a twisted Ferris Bueller knockoff in which not Ferris Bueller. Was it Risky Business?
Where he's Tom Cruise? Risky Business?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's Risky Business.
They have to like clean up the house last minute.
It's kind of like both, right?
A twisted Risky Bueller's Day Off scenario in which
it's hilarious.
Have to clean up the house.
It's hilarious.
They have to clean up the house, hide the original housekeeper and her husband in the basement. The original housekeeper ends up suffering a traumatic brain injury. She ends up trying to save her husband and bite through his duct tape bondage, and she ends up dying from a concussion. It's really terrible, and through the whole thing, the husband who lived in the basement, he's now banging his head against these light switches, which we find out aren't automatic.
Yeah, these automatic lights in the house are being activated by the man in the basement pressing them, right? Like, it's actually my favorite part of the whole film, I think, was this scene.
Oh, you're so right, because originally it was that we thought those lights turned on as the patriarch of the rich family came home as it walked past them, but no. It turns out that the guy who lived in the basement was activating those lights using Morse code to thank him for having this house, and unbeknownst to him, letting this other guy live in the bunker.
Yeah, and the main father, the poor father, he's kind of like, why are you thanking him? You know, and this man in the basement's like, well, I wouldn't be alive without him. And this rich man who doesn't even know of his existence is basically worshipped by the man in the basement. And I think that's what happens in our world all the time.
It is.
You know, like, how many people who are Trump supporters, like, worship him. They're like, he cares about me. Like, it's without him, we wouldn't be able to survive. He doesn't even know who you are, like Thanos. Like, I don't even know who you are. Like
I don't even know.
like don't even acknowledge your existence. He's not doing this for you. He doesn't even know about you, and like you're grateful for the bare minimum.
And that's exactly it too, right? And you've seen it in countless Facebook threads. So have I. All these people who are not CEOs or millionaires or billionaires who don't want the millionaires and billionaires to be taxed fairly. And they're like, well, they earned all their money. There's no point in giving that money, blah, blah, blah. And let me take it back to the cookie analogy, please. When I was talking with that woman, she was like, I said, you're not mad that there's somebody with 10 cookies who gets to decide how many cookies you get? And she's like, well, how did he get those cookies? And I said, he was born into a family that had 10 cookies. That's how he fucking got them.
Or he used slave labor, more or less, in his company to take advantage or tax breaks or whatever way they do.
Oh, Cookie Amazon.
Cookie Amazon, exactly.
Yeah.
Like the stimulus package that we're getting. People are so excited about that $1,200.
About the bare
minimum.
Not even minimum.
But like, I have a coworker who really broke this down for me, and I agree. You don't look at the $1,200 you're getting. Look at the amount of money that's in this package that's going to these corporations, like the cruise industry, and look at how much they should have given to you. Like they say healthcare. How are we going to pay for healthcare for everyone in this country, right? They could have paid for it right there. Instead of bailing out all these companies, they could have paid for healthcare for every single person. And now everyone who was employed, who's now been let go from their job and lost their health care, they have nothing. Like, how are they going to survive this virus plaguing the planet? There's like, you need to break down the numbers and look at not what you're getting, but what you should be getting. What's not coming to you and going to the people who don't need it.
And people just need to be more aware of that. Much like how in the movie, when this guy in the bunker, his wife is dying in front of him, he's now using Morse code with those lights to send out SOSs. His hands are tied, and he's literally banging his head bloody against these buttons so that way someone will see the light and will know that someone's calling for help. And the only person who even has a chance of seeing this, it's not the mom and father of the rich family. They're getting busy on the couch. They're sleeping or whatever. It's the son their son, who knows Morse code because he's in Cub Scouts or Boy Scouts, and he doesn't even get to finish deciphering the message, which is, help me please. And that's the thing. People just want to remain blind to these things, but you got to look around and see where people are calling for help.
Did you notice also there was like an obsession with America in the film a little bit?
There absolutely was. You're so right.
Like they mention America a lot. They talk about the Cub Scouts, the Boy Scouts, learning English. Like they constantly mention like the American lifestyle, and like these rich people are trying to almost like mimic that in some ways. And I thought that was really interesting. I don't know even know what it means exactly. Are they obsessed with the capitalism? Is that what they're trying to become? Because America's known as the land of dreams are coming true. I don't know, but I thought it was an interesting point they kept making throughout the film.
Well, I mean, it really is because now, from what I know, I'm no expert in Asiatic studies, but I'll use my firsthand experience. From what I know of Asian cultures, there's a lot of humility there. And on the whole, it's not about living in excess like Americans do. And it's not about bragging or boasting or anything like that. It's kind of just about, staying humble. One of the women who raised me throughout my teen years, her parents are Chinese immigrants. She's American-born Chinese. And despite the fact that she has a nice house with her husband in a very wealthy area of Long Island, I never see her like live a lavish lifestyle. The most money they ever spend is on their children. But really it's like, yeah, we still have the same TV we have from 12 years ago. Why? It works just fine. We still have the same this, we still have the same that. They never seem to be the type of people who want to live in excess, which is the opposite of this. Now, I know China and Korea are two completely different places, two very different cultures. Yes. But even when you and I took Japanese in high school, right? Everything we learned about the Japanese culture is about And, if anyone listening wants to come and prove me wrong, you're more than welcome to. I would love that. I'll provide contact info in the show notes and at the end of this episode. But it's very much just about, working hard, doing your best, and, and living a humble lifestyle, which the family in this movie, the rich family, they don't really seem to embody. And the son has this crazy obsession with Native Americans for some reason. And in order to get approval for his sister to work there, Kevin, to get his sister Jessica to work there, he says that she studied in Illinois.
Yeah.
He keeps bringing up American places.
They both studied in America,
because that's
right? They both went to college in America. That was the big thing.
Exactly, because that's what people respect. People respect America as the standard for some reason. So we get to this point where we had these warring lower class families that the rich family couldn't be less concerned about or even know about. And I want to bring up the smells.
Yeah, it's huge.
So there's a moment earlier in the film where the young boy who's getting tutored for art, he notices that their driver and their housekeeper smell the same. Nobody really thinks anything of it, but at that point, the main family are like, oh, we got to start using different soaps and stuff like that. And they think it's the soaps, but it's really not. It's the place where they live. They live in a basement and they smell kind of like moldy or stale. And even if they dress up well and they clean up well, they're still going to smell different than everybody else. And it sucks because this isn't something you can help. One of the day labor houses I lived in, they had a washing machine but no dryer. So my father would just hang everything that needed to be dried in the room that we lived in. He and I both shared a very small room. I was on a cot, and he would just constantly chain smoke in that room. So whenever I went to school, I went smelling like cigarettes. And I remember, even earlier in middle school, right? You probably remember me. I was the smelly kid in school.
Yeah, I remember. Didn't the guidance counselor pull you aside?
Our guidance counselor actually made a point to reach out to me and provide me with deodorant and cologne and tell me that I need to shower more. And it was from a good place because everybody else, the teachers had stepped in, because those are signs of neglect now that I'm looking back at it.
Absolutely.
And, I was being neglected. I didn't realize that. I was also not being raised with proper hygiene, wearing a lot of the same clothes that I had worn already. But this smell that this family has is unmistakable. While they're hiding from the rich family, they overhear that the father has a problem with the way his driver smells. And he says he's nice. He never crosses the line, but that smell crosses the line.
And they linger on his face, right, on the driver, on the father's face.
It breaks him.
He doesn't outwardly react, but you can see internally, that's it. He's just so sick of being judged and looked down upon. That's the moment where he's just broken inside.
And the worst thing also is that the rich guy doesn't even say oh, it's the smell of a basement or it's a moldy smell or whatever. He says it's the smell of people who ride the subway.
Yeah, he's judging everyone who does. They can't afford to just drive or have their own car or whatever it is.
It really is a shame. We'll bring that back toward the climax of the film. There's a crazy storm happening that night, and it's so funny. The son of the rich family, he chooses to sleep outside and go camping and have a tent. Everyone else is safe in their house from the rain. The main characters of the movie, they sneak out and go to their neighborhood where they're not safe from the rain. And the entire neighborhood, because it's downhill, is becoming flooded. This is trickle-down theory, right? All the rain is trickling from the upper class, except it's not wealth, it's terrible rain, and it's coming down and washing away all the poor people's everything they have. And it's flooding it up. We see in the main character's apartment, their plumbing is going all out of whack. There's shit shooting out of the toilet. They're trying to grab whatever they can.
They try to close the window, hoping that'll stop it, and none of it's obviously working. And they're all so defeated. The daughter starts smoking a cigarette, sitting on the exploding toilet. The son grabs that rock that he had, that big rock, and he's clutching that to him. The father's looking around, trying to figure out a plan to stop it, and there is none. And I think they wound up sleeping in a shelter that night.
Yes, and that rock is the dream of wealth,
yep.
Right? He gets it earlier on in the film from his college friend, and he says, this is a good luck charm. It'll bring wealth. It'll bring good fortune. So the only thing he grabs is that rock. Like, after all of this, he still has that dream, right?
He's clutching to that hope.
Even though it's heavy. It's such a heavy burden to hold, this dream of a better life. And so, yeah, they end up sleeping in a school gym that night. And that's where the father, his father, Kevin's father says, he goes, do you think all these people planned on sleeping in a gym tonight? No. He goes, that's why I don't have a plan, because, it's always going to go bad. And that kind of nihilism brings me back to my own upbringing and my own father, because I was talking to him about class. I learned it in elementary school. So there's middle class and there's lower class and there's upper class and there's middle upper class. And he said, son, there are two types of people in this world. There are rich people and there are poor people. You and I are poor people.
Wow.
He's really not wrong.
Yeah.
I'll give that to him, because, I've seen middle class people and I've seen them live comfortably, but once again, within their means, right?
Yeah. Within their means.
And that on any given day, if let's say you're a 5-cookie person, on any given day, you are just maybe a bad week away from being a 1-cookie person. But no matter how hard you work or how many cookies you save, you will never be that 10-cookie person. And that's why you should empathize with those 1-cookie people, because now, especially with Corona and everything happening, we're finding that it doesn't take much to make us 1-cookie people.
You're a lot closer with those people than you are with the 10-cookie people, right?
Exactly. And we're finding out those 10-cookie people really don't give a fuck about the 1-cookie people. So the next day, they decide to put together this surprise birthday party for the youngest son. And at that moment, the rich family, they just go and call the rest of the family that's been working for them. They call the driver, the father. They call the art teacher, who is actually the sister of the main character. They even call him, because turns out there's a love thing going on with him and that high school girl he's tutoring, which I'm not getting into that here. I thought it was a little weird, but whatever. It's not the point of the movie. And there was some interesting stuff that happened while they were setting up the party. The first thing is that the family we focus on in this film was blown away by the fact that the rich family could just put together a last-minute party.
Yeah, I mean, it was a pretty extravagant party. They had like a Native American theme going on, right? That they were going to dress up like Native Americans and do this whole like surprise moment. It was definitely kind of weird, but pretty impressive for the rich family to do, and inviting all these people that you normally wouldn't bring in.
Yeah, and I saw this very interesting. There were a couple of interesting things that happened. The first was that when they were driving in the car, the wife of the rich family and the father, who's their driver, there was all this undertone about that smell again, right? That poor person smell, that musk, that subway rider smell. And the guy noticed that the mother of the rich family, she opened her window while they were in the car together. And he noticed that she did that, and that you could see it on his face again. But while she was doing that, the crazy part was she had her feet up on the passenger seat, and they were her bare feet right next to the driver.
Yeah, but they were clean and rich feet.
Yeah, exactly, right? It's like, oh, well, you can put up with my smell, but I don't like your smell.
Yeah, there's definitely a sense of entitlement to the rich family that we see time and time again, and definitely that theme of the smell of, a poor person, a person of lower class.
Yeah. And going back to that smell real quick, the first person to notice it, as we mentioned before, was the child of this rich family. And there's some interesting stuff going on with this kid. He was the one who was in Cub Scouts, and he was the one who noticed the Morse code of the guy living in the basement trying to signal him. And there's a recurring theme in all three of the movies we're going to be covering, that it seems to be up to the children to save things. It happens in Platform, and it happens in Snowpiercer.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also think there was some similarities between the rich child and Kevin, because I think Kevin had also been a Cub Scout or had studied Cub Scouts. Like, he apparently knew Morse code as well.
Oh, that's right.
There was
you're right. And that comes
there.
back at the end. That's very true. And now, speaking of Kevin, he has this interesting moment because he manages to get invited to the party too, because his tutor, his English student, has a crush on him.
Which I think is because for the first time someone doesn't know his backstory, and they don't judge him for it because he has like this fake college degree. He seems like this smart older college kid, whereas instead of being like the loser who lives at home with his family and doesn't have like a degree or a job or anything like that. I think that's a part of why that romance blooms.
That's a very good point. She kind of just sees him for how he presents, which is as a nice guy, a genuine dude.
Yeah, a smart, nice guy. Yeah, definitely.
Now, he has this awesome moment where it's time to go down to the party and see how everything's going. And he says, "Do I fit in here?" And I can't tell you how many times this is something that I've felt in real life. And I'm sure you have too, just coming from humble beginnings. And as you get older, you meet such a diverse group of people. You meet people who are of different socioeconomic status than you. And you may go to one of their parties or something, and you may wonder, like, wow, what the hell am I doing here? I don't belong here. I've never been here. I don't even know how to act here in front of all these people.
Yeah, there's definitely a weird feeling. You think you can fit in, you could try to fit in, but in the back of your mind, this isn't really like your place. And whether, that's just you defeating yourself or it's because other people might judge you, there's definitely a feeling that, hey, I'm not one of these people. And I think throughout the film, Kevin, he keeps dreaming of a life that's not his own and thinking he can make it his own. He feels like he can fit in. But at this point, he started to lose hope and feels like, what am I doing? Like, why am I here?
Yeah, I mean, he still has that good luck rock, which comes into play a little bit later on. And as the party progresses, like you mentioned, there's this whole Native American theme that the patriarch of the rich family, he gets the driver in on it, and they both dress up in these Native American headdresses, and they're like, all right, we're going to do this whole act, and we're going to attack the girl carrying the cake, and my son is going to come and save her, and he's the good Indian. That's what they said. And it just seemed like this totally humiliating moment for the father we follow throughout this film.
Oh, it definitely is. You can tell there's like a power moment there too. You could see it in his face that he wants no part of this. And I think the rich father even mentions like, "Oh, I know this is not something normally you would do, but don't worry. I'll pay you extra. Like I'll make it worth your time to do this humiliating thing with me that you want no part of."
And that's the whole thing. And it brings it back to what we were talking about earlier when I said, like, when I was working for that DJ company over the summer, like there was just a lot of ridiculous stuff that I had to do in order to get that money. And it's like, to what lengths do you go, or what lengths should you go to get a paycheck when you're the type of person who can't really say no?
Yeah, like where do you lose your dignity doing this and trying to hustle and make a living?
Exactly. So you might remember this, and I can tell a story, but I feel like you tell a really good story. So what happens next? The huge turn I'm talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. So while this birthday party is going on, Kevin has decided, I think earlier in the film, he tells the father that he's going to take care of things, right? That he's going to make sure that everything's okay. So he decides that he's going to go down into the basement with his lucky rock, and he's going to insinuate that he's going to finish off the people living down there.
The former house,
so there's no evidence.
The former housekeeper and her husband.
Yep, the parasite more or less. So he goes down there, he sneaks down there while the party's going on, and he drops the rock really awkwardly, and he's waiting for that moment for someone to pop out, and nothing happens. So he goes down there, he goes to get the rock, and he realizes that the former housekeeper is just laying there. I think she's laying on her side, and she's just not moving. So he walks up to her and he's checking on her, and from behind him, the housekeeper's husband has the rock and just goes after Kevin and is trying to kill him with it. And Kevin, gets out of the way. He gets grabbed around the neck, I think, by like some sort of metal grabber.
He put like a wire together, like something you would use to catch
something
an animal.
like he's trying to kill Kevin, and Kevin's like just keeps getting out of the way. Now he's running up the stairs. He's dragging this metal wire behind him. He gets to the very top, and I guess the housekeeper's husband grabs the wire and trips him and pulls him down. and he just falls right above the hidden entrance, and he's laying there, and the man just starts bashing his head in with the rock, and it's pretty brutal. Like, you know, he hits him, I think, just once, and there's just a gush of blood, and then I think he hits him a second time, and Kevin's just laying there bleeding out. And the man's obviously unhinged. He's lost his wife. You know, his face is all bloody and disgusting. I mean, he has lost everything. I think he just wants revenge at this point.
What a visual, right? That Kevin, he is the dream of upward mobility. Like, that's what he has. He has so much spunk and so much desire and ambition. And this is such a great moment to see him kind of climbing those stairs up out of the basement, and only to be stopped short of his metaphorical dream. In this case, it's to live, but I think it was meant that way. And then to get crushed by the rock, which is his own that ambition, right? That hope for a better life.
Yeah, his own hopes that he's been clutching to this whole time.
Is out of everything in the house that they could have taken when it was flooded out, he took that rock.
Yeah, I mean, it's beautiful and tragic and brutal. You know, I've heard some people call this part of the movie kind of gruesome and very disgusting. You know, so it's definitely not for people who are afraid of blood. But so at this point, the former housekeeper's husband heads upstairs, and he grabs a knife from the kitchen, and he goes outside.
Unnoticed, completely unnoticed.
Yeah, no one noticed, and there's a ton of people here. I mean, all the friends of this family, they're all here. They're all gathered. The cake's coming out, and Kevin's sister is actually carrying the cake, and she's going to be, you know, attacked by the bad Native Americans, which are, you know, the two father figures, and they're getting ready to sing, and it's this big joyous moment, and through the crowd, you know, comes the housekeeper's husband clutching this knife, and He runs straight up to her, and he just stabs her right in the chest. I think right near the heart, right?
Yeah, it was right near her heart.
It's brutal. It's bloody. You know, he said everyone's, you know, kind of shocked for a moment, and then, you know, they start panicking. And then I think at this point the mother, right? The mother sees what happened.
The housekeeper mother or the rich mother? I'm trying to remember.
The housekeeper mother. Okay. I think now at this point the former housekeeper's husband attacks her. Right, I think he's like trying to slash at her, and she just keeps like dodging, getting out of the way.
I mean, she is a former athlete, as they touch on in the film. She's ready to take this guy to town, man.
Just briefly, you know, and meanwhile her daughter's bleeding to death on the ground next to this fallen cake, you know, and the two father figures are like, oh, what's going on here? And now, like, so basically this man is grappling with the mother, and like he's slashing at her, and then the rich father, you know, he rushes forward, and his son actually, I think, passes out, right?
He has a seizure from something we completely glossed over. We didn't even talk about it. Earlier in the film, when he was younger, he saw the housekeeper's husband come up from the basement, thought it was a ghost, lost his shit, and had a seizure. So he sees this guy again, seizure happens. They need to get this kid to a hospital. They start rushing out of the backyard.
Right, yeah. This is the traumatic moment this kid had growing up. So the rich father, his only worry is, you know, getting his kid to the hospital. He doesn't care about the woman bleeding to death. He doesn't care about the housekeeper being attacked. Doesn't even try to help her. You know, he turns to the driver and he's like, come on, like, you know, we gotta go and get the car. And obviously the driver, his daughter has just been stabbed. Right, this is the poor family, and you know, he's distraught. He's holding her, she's bleeding to death, and she's like, "Oh, it hurts, Dad." You know,
and I think the rich guy just says, "Throw me the keys." At this point, like, he'll settle for just driving himself. And so when the poor, should we just say rich father and poor father? When the poor father throws the keys, I think they get caught under his wife or something, right?
Well, it's at that moment that the two grappling figures kind of like walk back into frame, and the keys get stuck like underneath them fighting.
That's right.
Yeah. I think he's like, so the Parasite man, the former housekeeper's husband, he's like slashing at the wife. I think he gets her a few times, nothing too serious, and she grabs this skewer, right, of meat or food, and stabs him right through the side with it. I don't know if he instantly dies, but it's pretty brutal and definitely takes him out for the count.
And I think he just falls on her because they both end up on top of the keys, the car keys.
Yep.
And so here's where the rich father, he decides to lift those bodies up. Oh, what a moment. And he decides to grab the keys for himself. And when he does, despite all the panic, all the trauma, all the violence and chaos and the cacophony, he holds his nose because of the smell of his own housekeeper as he grabs the keys.
Yeah, it's such a degrading moment among this horribly brutal scene. And I think it's at that point that the poor father, the father of the family that, we were following, he just snaps. He's just had enough. So he basically picks up the knife from the former housekeeper's husband was using. He picks it up, he rushes forward, and he stabs the rich man right in the chest, right?
Yep.
He just kills him right there. He's had enough.
Because, what a fucked up moment that, at this point, you'd think everyone's being affected equally, right? Like, everyone is a victim of this terrible moment, this violence, and yet he still distinguishes himself from his housekeeper by grabbing his nose.
Yeah, it's this horrible tragedy. He doesn't care about anything else, But yeah, I mean, it's brutal. I think the rich woman passes out now at this point too. And what I love about this part is, the poor daughter is bleeding to death. All these bodies are on the lawn, and the poor father, what does he do? He runs away like a cockroach.
Oh, just like his wife said he would.
Yeah, he just takes off. He just disappears. Right? He leaves the carnage as is. He doesn't try to help anybody. He just runs away.
And we also find that the English student that Kevin was tutoring, of all people, there's some hope because she grabs Kevin. She grabs his body, which she shouldn't be able to live, and is trying to get the hell out of there. Like, it's because of her that he ends up alive at the end of this film, probably.
Yeah, I mean, after this scene, we see Kevin in the hospital, and he's just had brain surgery. And he's being interviewed by a detective, and he just keeps laughing. And the detective's like, why is this guy laughing? And the nurse or doctor tells him that it's because when a lot of people have brain surgery, weird things happen with their head and their brain, and he just can't control his laughter. So he's being interviewed about this horrible situation that occurred, and he just keeps laughing, right? And then they move forward. You see him and his mother in court. And I think they actually get off with a pretty light sentence.
Yeah, they do. I think it was like probation or something, but because it was like forgery of documents and
identity theft or something. I don't know, something like that, right? It turns out that his sister has passed away from being stabbed. She is dead. The father is missing. And their life is in ruins. It's in shambles now, right? They're basically starting from the bottom. They're even worse place than when they began.
Yeah, it really is rough. And so we see Kevin. He finds out his sister had passed away, and it's just him and his mom. They don't know where his father is.
I think he starts saying that the police keep following them, right? They think that he knows where his father is, but he doesn't. He really has no idea where he is. They have not heard from the father since that terrible day. The police keep following. There's actually like a hilarious sequence where the cops are like falling down the street, like trying to follow him, and like he knows they're coming. He has nothing to hide. Yeah. So I think he starts going for walks, right?
Yeah, and he ends up going to the a mountain that overlooks the house where he used to tutor, where his whole family ended up working for this rich family.
Like a hill, right? Because he's got a pretty good view of the house. I'd say like a large hill, right? Yeah.
As Obi-Wan would say, he has the high ground. And with this high ground, he's spying on the new family that purchased that house. And while Kevin's spying on them, he sees those lights that can only be activated from the basement. He sees them start blinking.
Yeah, so he begins to, I think he's like riding the subway or a train, and he's jotting down like the Morse code, and he's trying to decipher it, right?
And he finds out that it's this long letter from his father, who is now living in the basement. His father has become the parasite.
Yeah, he's become, the father, he was looked down on by the rich man, and he kind of looked down on the housekeeper's husband a little bit.
Yeah.
right? And now he's become that man. Like, he was just one step away from falling into that life, and now he's there. And there's this beautiful sequence where you go back to the birthday party and you see the father running away, and he goes through the side exit and he realizes he has nowhere to run, so he ducks back in through the garage and he goes down into the basement and hides himself there. And he talks about how he, in this Morse code message, and he talks about how he's always one step away from getting caught. He's sneaking up to get food. He takes the bare minimum. He doesn't ever want to be found out. He has nothing left. This is all he can do is just hide here and live.
And so Kevin writes in this letter back, and you see this awesome montage as Kevin's speaking what his letter is saying. You see him accomplishing everything. He's like, you know what? I'm going to get money, and I'm not going to con it. I'm not going to steal it. I'm going to earn it the right way. And I'm going to get this money, and I'm going to buy that house. And that's how we're going to get you, Dad. I'm going to buy that house for me and Mom, and we're going to see you. And you see, when they finally do get the house, the father, miraculously growing no facial hair, comes out of the basement. He comes out of the basement, sees Kevin, sees his family, and they embrace in this amazing hug as Kevin realizes that capitalism does work, and you just have to work really hard.
It's so beautiful and gorgeous. I think they're in the backyard, him and his mother, and he's dressed in like really fancy
his
clothes.
His haircut's different.
He's got a new haircut. Like, he looks like the perfect guy, and his mother looks happy. They're walking around that garden where the housekeeper's been buried. We didn't mention that, but and when the father comes up the stairs and he sees them there, it's such a beautiful, beautiful scene.
And then
just as you think this really happened, it goes back to Kevin with his brain injury and writing this letter. And there's a sobering moment where you kind of realize, my interpretation is that he probably will never be able to actually accomplish this. It's another one of the dreams that he hopes for, that many people hope for, that they're gonna make that money, they're gonna be rich and successful and have the life they want, and he's back right where he is in real life, where he's never going to accomplish that.
Especially, like, you thought it was bad before when he didn't have any money or any college education. Now he has a brain injury and he has a record. Like, there's no hope at all. Yet he still writes this letter thinking, one day.
It's sad, man. You think about how many people have that dream, and how many people fall into it and will never ever accomplish that. It's really heartbreaking, and I think it's real. It's very real.
Yeah, and the thing is, if he could have earned all that money and followed his dream, that's what he would have done from the start.
Yeah, but he didn't have the opportunities. It wasn't, a lot of people don't get those chances. Maybe if he'd had some more money, if he'd been given the chance to go to school and actually accomplish what he wanted, he very well could have lived that life.
And a lot of people would also say, well, if his parents had worked harder, then he would have been put in a better position for that. But his father is one of the hardest working people ever. He's had so many jobs at this point, and they just end up going bust or going out of business for whatever reason.
Yeah, life's just been hard on them.
I'm wondering if there was a subplot where his mother went to school for an athletic scholarship or something like that.
Maybe the director had
had some backstory for them beyond what we saw.
Yeah, he did put that in there for a reason. But yeah, so that...
I think he wanted you to see that they're all, like, they're not useless people. They are smart, talented people. They're people that have valuable life skills, but they'll never get the chance to use them.
That's a really good point. I really like that. And just like I really like this film, it did break my heart because once again, I thought it was going to be a much different film than it was.
Yeah, it takes a very dramatic turn.
Like I said, maybe it's just me because I'm not super cultured, but if a Korean film crosses my path, it's most likely because it's a fucked up film.
But for such a fucked up film, I think it really it spoke to a lot of people. I mean, this movie. So it won Best Picture, right, at the Academy Awards. It won Best Original Screenplay, Best Director, and Best International Film, which is huge. Those are 4 huge awards. It won the top honor at the Cannes Film Festival. It won the Golden Globe for Best Picture, the BAFTA for Best Original Screenplay, BAFTA for Best Film Not in English Language, It got the SAG Outstanding Performance by a Cast in the Motion Picture. I mean, the awards go on and on and on. Those are some of the
and they
major
were amazing
ones,
performances
but, I mean,
too, by the way.
They were. I mean, everyone did such a
Absolutely.
good job in this film. I mean, you really believed it. And, I mean, it was made on a pretty modest budget. It was about $11 million.
Get out of here, really?
$11 million. And it grossed over $266 million.
That's
worldwide.
incredible.
Yeah, which is, it's fantastic, you know, because you want to see a film like this succeed. I know when it first was released here in theaters, it did not do very well. I think it actually made under $1 million. But after, I think after the award ceremonies and it started to really get people's attention, they re-released it, and it did really, really well the second time around, and really well overseas and all over the world. You know, making much more than what it spent back and then some. So, you know, those are the kind of things you want to see because you want people to be able to make these kind of films. And he's obviously a very talented director and writer, so I am very excited to see what he comes out with next.
As am I. I'm going to probably go through his IMDb and see how many of his films I can watch from this point.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you know, there's not that many directors, I feel like, I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but that talk about social commentary anymore. You know, it was a big reason that I got into films with George Romero, you know, because he boldly put that stuff in his films, and there's a lot of great directors that do it. And so it's nice to see somebody, you know, in the mainstream right now really getting people's attention with this kind of work.
Do you have any recommendations of anything that you've been enjoying during this interesting time? Anything you've been watching or listening to?
Honestly, I've been trying to escape this class warfare stuff. Obviously, I watched Parasite. I had to see it. Like, I was dying to see it. But, you know, things are really depressing right now. I did see Jojo Rabbit, which I highly recommend. It's another fantastic film.
I've heard nothing but good things.
Yeah, so, you know.
I'll do it.
Yeah, it's great. There's some really good movies out there, a lot on my list. I'm just trying to watch movies and play some video games and keep my mind off the horrible world that we're living in. And, of course, trying to support my man Bernie Sanders as much as I can. Sharing some information amongst my social media, you know, trying to get involved a little bit with his campaign. He's got a lot of virtual town halls and stuff going
awesome.
on. So people are, you know, interested in change and wanting to, you know, have a better future. I highly recommend you check out Bernie Sanders' website. I think it's like berniesanders.com or something like that. So it should be pretty easy to find. And just, you know, take a look at his plans and listen, if your question is how can he pay for the things he's talking about, we just dropped a couple $1 trillion on Wall Street and a terrible bailout plan. So I rest my case there.
Absolutely. I like that. You know, I mean, we really don't try to get too political on this podcast, but except it's in the fucking name. But yeah, thanks so much for coming on. It was awesome to have you on this. I'm really looking forward to discussing the other two films with you. So if you all want to be prepared for next week, please watch The Platform on Netflix if you can. It is an awesome film. You can watch it in Spanish or in English, and that's what we'll be covering. And I just binge watched The Good Place on Netflix, which is great. It's so well written. I think everybody who is on the cast and production team are not monsters, which is really awesome. I've heard it's a very healthy,
That's cool.
Healthy place to work on that show, and it's
a good place.
Exactly, and it's so funny, and then it gets so real, but keeps its humor. It's really awesome. I've been doing that, and of course, listening to my podcasts. I think this is the first time I'm going to give a shout out to it because I'm stealing one of their bits. It's going to be the Daily Zeitgeist. It's an iHeartRadio podcast. Comes out every single day. They're much more committed than I am to making their podcast, and it is really awesome. It's a great mix of social and political issues, but also comedy. The hosts do a pretty good job of keeping it light. At the end of every episode, they have a song that they write out on, and now that I know you can do that legally just by saying the name of the song and the artist, I'm going to do that for every one of my podcasts.
Yeah.
All right. So Ty, thanks so much. It's been awesome having you. Looking forward to the next one that we do together, which is going to be The Platform.
Me too. I had a ton of fun. Really like talking about this stuff. I think it's important, and I appreciate being on.
And one more time, you can find us on Twitter at PolitiPopPod. You can email us at politipoppcast@gmail.com, or you can find us on our website at politipoppodcast.wordpress.com. We're going to be writing out on a Slipknot song known as Pulse of the Maggots. I think it is super relevant now, and it's not just an awesome beat to bang your head to. It is both of those things. In the meantime, keep watching stuff, keep reading stuff, keep learning. Oh no,
they were
Germany. That's right, absolutely right. Yeah, so they came.
They're white. They're definitely not. They're not
Yeah,
Asian.
I think that was racist of me.
They eventually said
They're a white family. They're American. Yeah. But yeah, so this German family moves in, and while Kevin.
Not really, man. I've been going back to the well, watching some old stuff, and watching some Yu Yu Hakusho.
Of course, yes,
anime,
hard hitting.
Which class struggle right there, you know. Yusuke's got a tough life. His mom's not the best, you know. So
and you gotta go to demon hunting to pay those bills.
Hello, my name is Michael Carbuccia, and I'm a fucking cunt.